Let's see here. Well, hopefully you guys will be able to hear me. I've been having trouble, uh, technical difficulties with my phone. But anyway, we'll try that again. Let's see if that's not going to work. Okay. Well, I thought I'd come on a little early because there was one thing after another, and I figured I better just do it now rather than to wait another half an hour because it's just I'm not even going to go into it. But if anything, hopefully you guys had a chance to hit your notification, and it doesn't appear that anyone has come in. And I would imagine that there was probably some confusion concerning the notification. It looked like we had someone come in and say, "Does this mean it's live?" So I apologize for the inconvenience on that. Maybe you guys just have to listen to this later. But the Gangstalking Matrix is what we're going to talk about. And we always have a live stream, if possible, on Friday, and I've talked about that before, that targeted individuals are subjected to isolation and deprivation methodology. Okay. All targets deal with it, period. It's like the fundamental reality that all targeted individuals have post-traumatic syndrome. I think anyone who would deal with group harassment would have, PTSD. You're going to be traumatized. You're going to be dealing with this stuff, and it's going to have an effect. And I put up a video on the mythos of medication once again, and some of the misperceptions that are out there that I know all targets who are confronted with the idea that this is just nothing more than mental illness you got to deal with. Well, we're going to get you some help. We got to get you to see a doctor, which in my experience, and I'm just, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm just my own doctor by default. And I've been through the system, and I've been a targeted individual for a long time. And the whole theme of being mentally ill is always going to be on the table. But you're always confronted with that. And by my own experience, the individuals that I ran into, during the time that, and we'll talk about that iceberg as I don't know, a type of map that is used. But and during the time that I became addicted to tranquilizers and was dealing with anxiety and so on and so forth, which is a lot of the problem when you're dealing with the use of long-term meds for that mythos of curing mental illness, is that you have different dysfunctions that end up mounting up. And of course, the whole idea of the iceberg, just to get into that real quick, is the same thing that I dealt with. So I was having a lot of anxiety and insomnia, right? And of course, I was dealing with gang stalking. And if any of you know that, when someone is attacked at night, or their space is invaded in a way where they don't feel safe, they're going to have a hard time relaxing. They're going to have anxiety. And of course, I've talked about the fact that targets are exposed to different types of methods. One of the methods is to attack the target with noise campaigns or with break-ins, invading their space, attacking them at night and stuff. I was dealing with all that, right? Of course, I couldn't say anything about that, right? The only thing I could really talk about, and that was a good decision that I made, was that I was just dealing with insomnia. I couldn't sleep. And of course, that was basically the byproduct of the harassment. So first it started out with indoctrination, when you're dealing with the matrix of gang stalking, where people are, putting out suggestions and acting strange around the targeted individual, and then becomes more aggressive incrementally. And we'll talk about that later. And then it moves up to the aggressive stage where, people are literally, walking up to you with personal information that no one else should know. and harassing you in a way that is very obvious. You get obvious surveillance. People are breaking into your house. The themes become more aggressive. We're going to poison you. We're going to give you cancer. We're going to drive you crazy. We're going to hurt you. We're going to kill you. All those things are happening. And then you start experiencing the real heavy stuff. If that doesn't get to you, and they come in your house, right? You're asleep. You might get drugged. They might take your clothes off like they did me, and so on and so forth. And then you don't know what's going on. And as a target who gets thrown into this gangstalking matrix, especially if you have no idea that it even exists, then you're gonna have a hard time dealing with this. But as I was going through that, I started to drink, right? And that was really the only way I could go to sleep. I mean, anything, just, a sound or, something that was natural. Maybe, a vehicle driving by, teenagers revving their engines or whatever. And of course, everything is gang stalking. That's one of the biggest problems that targeted individuals deal with, is that you start processing information differently, and you can't tell whether you're dealing with something that's just a little off, or whether these people are perps or something, because you're looking for it everywhere, right? That's one of the things we're going to talk about. But I went in to get this, some medication for sleep, or what. I couldn't drink anymore. They were putting stuff in my food to the point where I was starting to have liver failure, and I was getting accused of shooting up drugs. And there's no way you could have liver failure from heavy drinking from booze, unless you're drinking hard liquor and taking Tylenol. And I'm like, no, I'm just drinking beer. Well, and so they tested me for all this. Well, you can't drink anymore for your insomnia. You're going to have to take meds. And so I tried all these different medications. And the only thing that worked was the tranquilizers, right? So I ended up getting hooked on those things. And that was another conspiracy that was covered up that took me 24 years to figure out, that you can become addicted to that stuff to the point where it changes. People talk about protracted withdrawals and stuff like that, or, detoxing from, psych drugs or whatever, and how you have to do a slow taper. But benzos, they're the worst. They're worse than methadone. They're worse than anything. And that whole thing has been covered up to the point where, to me, it took about 2.8 years for it to stop. And it was like panic disorder, right? So at first I go in to get this stuff, and you got anxiety, right? And insomnia or whatever. Okay. And so then I get hooked on this stuff, and I start having panic attacks, and I start having other problems. And of course, then the iceberg, getting back to the point, the iceberg of mental illness. Well, all that stuff was always under the surface. And now we're just, it was just ready to come out. And so, like the Titanic, you hit the iceberg or whatever, which probably didn't even happen if you look into that. Well, now all these other things are manifesting as the sequelae of your mental illness, right? So, first it was anxiety and insomnia, and now we have depression and panic disorder and all these things. But really, it was just addiction. It was just the meds. Okay, that's all it was. And now I'm not taking anything, right? I don't need anything for sleep. I don't need any of that stuff. And I was told by these doctors, like I said, there was probably a couple of them that were okay that I ran into. As the point I'm making is that as a targeted individual, you're going to be dealing with the accusation that you're mentally ill. That said, hey man, I think you're dealing with an addiction to benzos. Okay. You become chemically dependent, and I don't think you're mentally ill. There was a couple people that had their head screwed on that actually tried to help. Everybody else was just indoctrination, right? And that's why I put those videos up there. And that's why I have a lot of that stuff in the playlist. And if you'll notice that individuals who are confronting the targeted individual community, the accusation is always the same. You're mentally ill. You're crazy. You need meds, and all the stuff is just in your head. You're just imagining all these things, and that's going to be the accusation that targets get consistently. And just to see because I've had problems with my microphone, and so I'm going to have to ask you guys before I continue. Can you hear me? Is the volume okay, guys? Could you give me some feedback out there? By the way, welcome to the live stream, Alexander Woods, Where Dolls Dance, Dollhouse, welcome. And Mantra 2224, welcome to the live stream. Can you? Okay, Steve the Pigeon, welcome. He says I can hear you. It's all good. Great. just to make sure that that you guys are hearing me. I got something on the speaker, and I've been having trouble with that. But anyway, so but getting back into that that whole thing with the iceberg, you could take that into the targeted individual experience as well, right? Because that's really what happens. Because I've talked about the framework of gang stalking before, right? And it's not just targeted individuals who are dealing with that framework; it's everybody, right? Not everybody that you run into that accuses you of hallucinating or being mentally ill is necessarily a gang stalker or in on it, because they've been indoctrinated too, right? In fact, a lot of the people that tried to help me during that time, they weren't perps. They weren't trying to. They weren't. They didn't have some type of malevolent plan to ruin my life or anything. They were just ignorant. Okay, they were indoctrinated. Right. A lot of the doctors that come out of that whole system, they believe they're taught this stuff. Right. They don't look into it. They don't. That's why I put the videos up. That's why I try to have this information, because everybody always does the same thing, and it's frustrating. Okay, one of the other themes that targets are going to be dealing with is frustration, right? Because people are going to be ignorant to what you're dealing with, right? So the iceberg is a little bit of strangeness, right? So the targeted individual is going to start seeing things are a little off. And as I mentioned before, the framework is already there. So people have been blinded, have been indoctrinated. And a lot of times I'll get accused of things by people in the target individual community, well, you're talking about demons and witchcraft or whatever, and all this, ghouls and ghosts. And it's okay. Now you're using a gaslighting technique on me. Okay. And I try to explain to people that the framework that you're dealing with is very important to understand. And you have to understand the landscape that you're dealing with, because if all of a sudden everybody turns into a CIA employee, or they're working for some type of secret government program, an MK Ultra, and you're a target who's dealing with heavy, all-encompassing harassment, you're going to have a problem with that. Okay, because it's bigger. And when you look into the government and you look into the framework of this whole scenario that is around you, the mechanism, the meat grinder that the targeted individual is surrounded by, that you're going to have to avoid, by the way, is bigger than a government program. Even though government programs are involved, they are. Okay, I'm not going to deny it. Directed energy weapons can be involved. Okay, voice to skull can be involved. People breaking into your house, professionals and stuff like that, covert drugging, surveillance, all that stuff can be involved. But it's not the totality of the framework of what you're dealing with. And there are people who know what's going on. Okay, not everybody. And it seems like it, though. And that's one of the hardest parts to deal with as a targeted individual as you're moving through this landscape, especially if you're one of those people who's trying to explain what's happening, is that, there's going to be so many people who just believe that you're crazy because it's designed that way, right? For them, that's not possible. And the framework is part of that. Okay, the obfuscation of the spiritual dimension. I've talked about, people have a tendency to break into two different areas. Well, I believe it's all witchcraft and demons, and then other people, I believe it's all technology, but I think it's evil, and I believe in Jesus, but I don't believe that there's demons doing this. I met some guy with a suit on and a DNA resonance frequency chamber, and they're using a computer, and it's all AI, and I don't want to hear it. Well, I'm not saying there isn't technology involved. My point is that if they got something like that, they got it from them. And that you have to see what you're up against, and you have to see that there are a lot of things that can't be explained just by government programs and artificial intelligence and cryogenic supercomputers and directed energy weapons. Okay, some of it can, but not everything. In fact, I was listening to a guy today, and I was listening to his testimony where his doors are locked in his house, and he's having these experiences uh, that can't be explained with technology, even though he basically, that's pretty much his only explanation for what's happening to him. Okay, but for the things being moved around in his house, and stuff disappearing and appearing, and he's wiping out a sink, and the next thing he'll turn around, and it's messy, it's dirty again. Unless he's hallucinating, something else is going on. And I'm going to just admit right now, I've had weird stuff like that happen to me. I've talked about that a lot, when targets, they think they lose something or whatever, and they're looking around, they're checking their pockets 15 million times, or whatever, and then the 150th time you check your pocket, it's right there. It's there, or it's you look somewhere for whatever, and it's not there, and your doors are locked or whatever. Things are being moved around in your house. I mean, you got everything chained up. There's no way anybody can come in. You're surrounded by cameras, but it still happens. Okay, I've seen that kind of thing, and for me, it's demonic. Okay, for other people, they believe the government's controlling all that stuff, and they've got technology that moves stuff around in your house. But at that point, it's not working out. Okay, and you look into the logistics of this whole thing, and you look at some of the people who are involved in targets who are dealing with heavy harassment, and they're not working for the government. There's something else. And when you look into the government framework, and you look at the hierarchy, which is what I'm getting at, it goes back to the spiritual dimension and the origins of mankind, and then the fact that you're a commodity and you're being processed, and ultimately, the puppet masters are really concerned about deceiving, gaslighting, and devouring you. And they're using you to condemn the perps, and they're using the perps to confuse you, and they want emotional currency, and they want propositional tyranny, and they want to take everybody with them to hell. Okay. In the meantime, you've got government programs, you've got the Stasi kind of policing stuff, you've got people involved in experimentation, you've got all these pipe dreams being sold, you have a social structure and a menagerie that is set up with the infrastructure that gets people into coercion where they can be processed and judged. Some people go along with this stuff with full knowledge, okay? And some of them are pretty scared because they see what's happening to you or people like you, okay? You're one of those people who is held up, like the guy nailed to the dartboard, right? If you okay, you can go ahead and blow the whistle. You can go ahead and resist the hive or the horde, but guess what? We're going to come after you next. And if anybody else is thinking about it, well, they're going to get the same treatment. And when you see targets deal with harassment and all the things that can happen to you as a target individual, it's pretty scary, right? Because if you're one of those targets that is experiencing heavy harassment, that it's pretty much everywhere, and it's all surrounded by plausible deniability, and it's beyond. There's nothing you can really do except roll with the punches, right? You can try to confront gang stalkers, but you're going to be accused of being crazy, and you're going to be emotional, and that's never good. Okay, or you can try to control everything and be frustrated, right? That's not going to work for you either, right? So you have a framework, you have the ignorance, you have the indoctrination. People are blinded to what's going on. You have the menagerie that is set up around you. You have all the plausible deniability. You have the mechanisms like psychiatry and other things that can be legitimate, but are taken into an area of perversion and mechanized against people, not just targeted individuals, but for profit and other things. That you have that type of indoctrination where people are led to believe they have mental illness either for profit or for other purposes, and an obfuscation of what's really happening to people, right? And it's almost like a manufactured mental illness, not only for targeted individuals but for other people, for the sake of profit and gaslighting, right? Oh, there's no demons, that's just mental illness. Or no, you need some help, and we're going to do this for you. And, the dysfunction that you're experiencing, it's not a result of improper treatment or bad, a bad protocol concerning psychiatry and the medical industry. It's just, that's just what happens to people that are crazy. People that have mental illness just get worse. Well, what's the point? And saying, well, we're trying to help you, we're trying to ease your symptoms. And so you have this whole, method of reductionism set up in something that is obviously geared for profit, right? You have people who are basically making you worse and making money, right? That's evil. Okay, that's, if anything, that, right? And people know it, and they turn a blind eye. It's like when I confront false teachers or people who are preaching false doctrine, and I say, okay, I could see this is kind of confusing, so here, I'll break this down for you, and I'll break it down in a way that's impossible to refute. And what do? They ghost you, right? Or they start erasing your comments. They'll engage with other people in the comments, and they'll have that little sword play going on. But if you get somebody in there that can just prove that they're full of it, or that they don't, that they know it, they know they are. Okay, so why are they doing it? Because it's popular, right? It gives them control, whatever it is, whether it's some type of prosperity doctrine or some type of escapism or something, and that's popular. They don't want to go against it because that's their bread and butter. They're making money on it. They don't care whether it's true or not. And these doctors who are involved in this stuff, if a stupid delivery guy like me can figure this stuff out and post it on social media and everything else, and you have, it's not that you have to take my word for it. You have documentaries about this stuff. You have other doctors who have looked into this stuff, and so why is it just being hidden, right? why was the cover up of post-acute withdrawal benzo addiction that I experienced for 24 years such a mystery to everybody that supposedly was trying to help me, as they told me I was going to die an early death and never have natural sleep for the rest of my life because of profit? Okay, if they can give somebody a drug and make them a slave, right, and make money off it, they don't care. It's not about helping people. And targeted individuals are dealing with the same thing, right? You're being basically driven to dysfunction, and that's the whole idea. Now, like I said, some people are being experimented on. I think that's probably a little more rare than a lot of people would believe, because everybody, of course, believes that they're the focus of some type of huge government conspiracy, when it's possible, and I don't know this because like I said, I'm going to leave that up to you. It's possible that you are dealing with demonic oppression and people who are literally possessed and being controlled by demonic spirits, and you've been indoctrinated to believe the government is after you, and they're not. It might not be that way. Is that possible? It's possible. Is it possible that that's not what's going on? That's also possible. And it's also even more confusingly possible that you're dealing with an amalgamation of all of it. I've seen that too, to where you got targets who the people are breaking into their houses, and they're waking up with all these weird things going on. And there's obviously professionals involved, and there's obviously demonic stuff involved in their scenario too. So it's like an amalgamation of all of it. Okay. But the thing is that to avoid the dysfunction and to avoid the propositional tyranny that happens to targets, you have to understand what you're dealing with. So you might say, well, what you're saying, it seems like it doesn't matter what I do, because I'm just going to be dealing with harassment. Well, you are going to be dealing with harassment, but the way you process the information is going to give you the edge. Why? Because it's about manipulation. They want to manipulate you. They want to get you to believe things that are false. They want to get you into an emotional state. Okay, they want to confuse you. They want to break you down. They want to control you. And if possible, they want to turn you into your own worst enemy, to the point where they don't even have to harass you anymore. And you literally are crazy at that point, right? That's the whole point of doing this to someone. And the long-term gaslighting and internalization that targets deal with is that they don't, at first they've got to attack the target and get them sensitized and traumatized and everything. But once they do that, they back off. and the target is reading into everything and listening to all the conversations around them and looking for headlights and color combinations of vehicles and assuming that all these things are happening, they don't have to do it anymore. It's like a mind virus. They have literally invaded your mind, and they have reprogrammed the target to process information differently. And all they've got to do is have some perp or whatever come up every now and again, rattle your cage, and you're basically your own handler. Okay, it sucks, but it's true, and I think it happens to all targets on some level. I know that it happened to me, and I think it probably happens to everybody because you don't know what's happening. And I've talked about this before. Sensitization is pretty intense, and it's always important to go through these things, especially for new targets. If we're going to talk about the Gangstalking Matrix, we have to talk about sensitization, which is a form of harassment involving subjective stimuli to create associations from actions, words, phrases, environmental stimuli, basically for covert harassment and communication with the target to sensitize them to objects of significance, all, sign language, all those things, colors, whatever, smells, whatever they use, which has reciprocity in the sense that you are creating associations to trigger the target. And, for the plausible deniability that targets deal with, once they are sensitized to whatever it is, whether it's the color red or a headlight or a word or a phrase or, whatever, a specific type of whistling or something, sign language, that the level of trauma and the level of frustration and emotional currency that the target individual has, they can be triggered with this stuff, and they will go into that emotional state of mind that makes them vulnerable, or they might react and try to confront a gang stalker. But of course, if it's in a public setting, the other people are going to think they're crazy, because to them, they don't see it. And I've talked about that before, whether it's the themes or the menagerie that the target individual is thrown into, that this stuff was there before and you just didn't see it. Okay. It's kind of like when one of your friends gets a particular type of vehicle, right? A white Ford, whatever, or, pick whatever vehicle you want. And they were always driving around. You never noticed it before. You weren't looking for them. Oh, that's the same car my friend has. And you start seeing it everywhere. I'm not saying that everything that you experience is simply a product of your sensitization and now you're just reading into it. That's not true. I'm saying that it can be that way. That's the goal. That's what they want. Okay. That's the whole point of doing that to you. And it's also a type of menagerie that's already there, right? It's already out there, but you didn't see it before. And now that you see it, that people can be gaslighted in mass, right? And I've talked about the control programming or things like the Mandela effect, where, the target will be dealing with all this stuff and they'll be paranoid and they'll be sensitized. And then they'll turn on the radio or they'll turn on the TV and they'll watch the local news, and people just all of a sudden, it seems like they're watching you. It seems like everybody knows. It seems like you're in the Truman Show, right? Because now you've been sensitized, and a strange look from someone, whether it's a newscaster or whatever, or, the menagerie that's already out there for people who are looking for it, which in my opinion, it's like that. It's like the Mandela effect. Then it's everywhere, and it's mesmerizing. It's that all-encompassing doom that they hand the target on a silver platter, and it's already there. So you are experiencing that type of sensitization, and it has reciprocity, and you're processing information differently. But it's not just the fact that targets are reading into everything. It's that those things were there, right? They were literally there. And now the little comments, maybe on the radio or the comments, on whatever the late night show or whatever it is, like some of the guys that I've talked to. I was at the hospital with somebody, and he's like, it's like everybody knew, and he was telling me there's just no way. And I was like, it's already there. Okay. All those things were there, but you weren't paranoid before. And, if somebody's cracking a joke and you're not a targeted individual who's sensitized to these things or whatever, you're just going to think you don't catch on, right? You're not going to be thinking anything, right? But once the target is attacked with personal information and they go through that sensitization process that I've talked about before, where people are incrementally attacked, now you're prepped and you're going to be seeing this stuff everywhere. Stage one, you have very subtle innuendos and coincidences and a little bit of street theater and people are treating you differently and they're talking about stuff. Oh, no, we're not talking about you. This has something to do with something else, but you're just never in on it. And you have little facial expressions and people are snickering and you don't know what's happening. And you move to stage two. And then all of a sudden the directed conversations become a little more intense. And it seems like people are talking about you because the personal information gets intensified. And then, of course, you feel even more deprived and left out of the scenario, and you start seeing things around you change. It's even more intense, and then there's suggestions, and then of course it steps up to the point where it gets kind of aggressive, and people are treating you in a way where not only is it that you're not kind of in or involved as you were before, but people are getting, I don't know, hostile with the target, and the accusations and the little themes and stuff move all the way up into full on personal information. Okay. They move into places where people are doing things to the target. They're dealing with food tampering. People are lying to them. They're being obviously hostile to them. They're getting attacked. The street theater is intense. They might be dealing with, covert drugging and poisoning. People are breaking in. They're doing stuff to them at night. It's unavoidable. It's obvious that you're being hunted down. It's obvious that people are after you. And then they're accused of things. Of course, there's disinformation and, the manufactured justification for this whole thing. If you've got an addiction, they're going to say that's what it is. If there's nothing wrong with the targeted individual and they don't have a criminal history or anything, then they're just going to make up, whatever, and just get you to think that they all believe you're some type of deviant or drug dealer or freak or pedophile or whatever. And then you're dealing with all this stuff to the point where you're afraid for your life and the trauma is at its max potential. But along with that sensitization, the targeted individual has become very apprehensive, and now they are dealing with that, the whole, paranoia thing. Well, you're just paranoid, right? Of course they are. Okay, that would be labeled as the manufactured targeted individual warranted suspicion, where of course you're going to be nervous. Of course you're going to be apprehensive. Of course you're going to be looking around for this stuff and wondering what's going to happen, because this type of harassment methodology involves that type of sensitization and perceived paranoia. Okay. And so it's basically a way to hijack the targeted individual's mind, physiology, psychological mechanisms. And of course, you need those for survival, right? Because after all, you're being hunted down. Okay. After all, people are doing these things to you. It's asymmetrical warfare, and it comes from all directions. And like I said, it just depends on what you're dealing with. The framework can involve a lot. Okay, you could be dealing with something that's government and demonic. You could be dealing with something that's just purely demonic. You could be dealing with something that is just like MK Ultra or whatever. All these things can happen, but the point is that you are being manipulated, and these people are also being used like puppets. Okay, and if you understand how that works, and that the framework was always there, and you've been thrown into this thing, it's going to make a whole lot more sense. Because most of the time, targets, they look at this whole thing, they look at that asymmetrical warfare where it involves covert methodology. They're being attacked. There's plausible deniability. It creates that hypervigilance in the targeted individual. They're being threatened. They're being attacked. There's street theater. There's directed conversations. There's personal property that's being attacked. There's workplace harassment. There's directed energy weapons. But they process it as something that is just, people are getting notifications on their phones. They're all driving around. They're getting poisoned, and all the stuff that's in their food is, interacting with the 5G network. And there's a supercomputer, and they're, now the government's chasing them around with satellites and everything. And everybody at the Quickie Mart from the dentist office is getting notifications, and these, FBI agents are going around telling everybody that they're a pedophile or a drug dealer. Doesn't have to work that way. Okay. But it looks that way. The thing that you have to realize is those things, can happen kind of, or they can happen like that exactly, but they don't have to. Okay. Because if you're a target who's experiencing a lot of this stuff in all those areas, more than likely you're dealing with things that are demonic, and more than likely You're just dealing with that mechanism, and the illusions that are created are important because it's like when people believe that someone is reading their mind or whatever, and it looks very convincing. Okay, and maybe some of that stuff is going on, but it doesn't have to. You have to be open to other options. And I've talked about how, when you deal with the hive and the horde of gang stalking, it's important to understand how these things can work. Okay. For example, we'll use a hypothetical scenario where the targeted individual is in a crowd of people. Okay. Okay. They start thinking about something, and they think it's just their thoughts. A lot of targets will talk about that. The V2K sounds like my voice, or it sounds like my girlfriend's voice, or it sounds like my coworkers or my dead relative, whatever, and they'll perceive it as AI. Okay. The point is it could be demonic, it could be artificial intelligence, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is to see that all of a sudden you're thinking about something. Okay. And it could be something natural, but it could be a setup. And in this hypothetical example, that would be a setup. Now, what about the other people around the targeted individual, assuming that demonic entities can do that, which they can? You can take my word for it. Now, they'll be thinking about something, okay, and they'll start talking about it amongst themselves, and the targeted individual will be, wow, they know what I'm thinking. That's proof. That's proof to them that they can read their mind. But it doesn't necessarily have to do with that. You see how that works? And so the illusion that's set up by the demonic puppet masters, where the target individual starts thinking about something, and then the other people start thinking about something. And even with that correlation effect that I've talked about before, people can get hostile with the target, right? And, every time that target comes around, those people will start to feel agitated or whatever. And that could be demonic. You can process it as total technology or demons. It's all amalgamated together. The point of the technology comes from them. However they do it is irrelevant. Okay, you have to see the puppet masters. But the illusion is what? Is something that is going to create propositional tyranny in the mind of the targeted individual. What happens to targets? Okay, this is for people who experience higher forms of harassment. They become agoraphobic. People are reading my mind. I don't know. And then I get paranoid when I'm in a crowd of people, and I start thinking even weirder. And then people start laughing and they start talking about all this stuff. And I stay home now. I'm afraid of going out of the house because everybody's reading my mind, right? And it just gets weird and I can't breathe and I have panic attacks. Well, okay, let's take a look at that. Are you sure that's what's going on? It might not be. Okay, it might be an illusion. And the whole idea that you buy into that proposition scares the shit out of you. And then you get scared and you get nervous and you start thinking funny stuff, and they can even make it worse. And then you're having a panic attack on top of it. And the next thing you know, you're shut in and you can't leave the house. That's how they work. Okay. And it might not be what's going on. Okay. And then you get other people involved in this whole thing, where they're pumping out information that, in my opinion, could be disinformation. And there's two effects that come out of that. Like when you get into people who are saying, well, no, it's just a supercomputer and all this stuff is going on. And you get people who are reading Robert Duncan's material or whatever, which is fine. But do you realize that he believes most of the people that are looking into this are just mentally ill? He believes that less than 10% of the people out there who believe this technology is being used on them are actually victims of the technology. He believes most of them are crazy. Okay. What's the point of what I'm saying? Is that people become emboldened and they experience this stuff and it's real. Remember, he's an atheist. Okay. Which has its own complications, especially in the framework that I just presented to you. Okay. That's a problem. Okay. There's no such thing as a demon. There's no such thing as God. It's all technology, and it's just like a little ghost game. And all the Christians are just, who's crazier? Okay. At that point, you have a target who is getting affirmation. This stuff is really going on, but I'm not really going to confirm you as an individual who's experiencing it, because most of them out there are crazy. And, the solution is, that you have to know that there's some kind of computer somewhere doing all this stuff to you and controlling all these people out there who are harassing you. Okay. Well, that doesn't really help you out a whole lot. There could be some serious problems that go along with that. Okay. And first of all, it's like the law of zero effect, and I've talked about that before, that there are things that are possible, but the possibilities will cancel themselves out in the situation because some of them are irrelevant. Okay, it's like Calvinism, right? When people start arguing about, well, God's ordaining everything and he's just picking certain people, and well, if okay, we'll assume that's true. If that's true, it doesn't matter what I believe. So why are you arguing with me anyway? Well, arguing that it doesn't make any sense. But what if it's false? Okay, well, that's a problem, because if you believe it, then you're believing a lie. Okay, and you're believing a lie about God, and you're believing a lie about salvation, and you're believing something that is from the devil. Okay, that's a problem. Okay, so the law of zero effect would say the only safe position would be to believe that Calvinism is false, because if it's true, it doesn't matter. You see how that works? Okay, you see how that works? So we'll say that there is no God and all this stuff. We'll say that Duncan is right. We'll say all these people that are talking about technology are right, and all these things are just computers, and none of it matters. There's no demons, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to pray. But at the end of the day, you really can't do anything about it, because it's a hierarchy of a military industrial complex scenario that you can't control. You're just under the tyranny of it, and eventually you're just going to die. Okay, and it won't matter. Okay, but if they're wrong, okay, now you got a problem. Now you're going to run into the Lord Jesus Christ. Now you are literally dealing with a spiritual scenario where you needed to pray. Now you are dealing with something that you had to process the information and understand what was going on. Okay, because the law of zero effect would say that's the only safe position. It's like playing chess. Okay, if all this stuff is just a computer somewhere and we're all just going to die and be gone, it won't matter. Okay, if God is just electing certain people and he's just choosing and determining what you believe, it doesn't matter. But if it's wrong, it really matters. Okay, if all these things involve demonic delusions and illusions, it matters how you process the information. If people out there are believing that a supercomputer is turning all these people against them, and that people are just part of some demonic hive, and they've got somebody in a cryogenic chamber hooked up to you and all this stuff, okay, and that's not true, that's a problem. Okay, it's a huge problem, and the issue comes down to that affirmation and indoctrination, because and I've talked about this before, when you get into the scriptural criteria, and it's not to turn gangstalking into a soteriological platform, but what did Jesus say about the lamp of the body, right? Which is your eyes, right? That if the lamp is good, that the whole body will be filled with light. What's he talking about? Right? Is he talking about people who just feel happy and they look like they're alive, right? They've got that gleam in their eye. No, he's talking about seeing the truth. And if you know the truth is going to set you free. It matters what you believe. Okay. And if someone believes a lie and they believe that darkness is the truth, right? Then their whole life is filled with that black darkness and deception. You don't want that. Okay. It's like with false teachers. They're teaching something like Calvinism or something else where they believe it's true, but it's darkness. It's not light. Okay. And you have to see what's really happening. When you look at the Gangstalking Matrix and you see this menagerie that you're walking through as a target individual, and you experience harassment and people are attacking you with personal information, and it appears that they are reading your mind. It appears that all these things are true, and you wonder if this technology exists, and they're looking through your eyes, and all these things are happening, and they're putting nanoparticles in your food, and you have to starve yourself, or you have to shave your head, or other things, or you have to detox your body constantly. What are you doing? You're playing into the lie of the enemy, and you're starving yourself, and you're shaving your head, and you're subjecting yourself to more trauma. You are literally falling down the rabbit hole of deception unless you process the information correctly, which involves manipulating, gaslighting you, and eventually destroying you. Okay? It's important to see the truth. Okay? It's important to understand what's really happening. But I've seen people do that. They literally believe that there's stuff in their food to where now if they eat more than a couple times a week, that they can get attacked by directed energy weapons. Okay, there's no evidence of that, but you know what? Demons could do that. Disinformation could get you to believe that. There's no evidence to suggest that if someone shaves their head and eats a bunch of onions and garlic, that they're not going to have V2K. Okay. Now, at the same time, I eat onions every day. I eat garlic, and it's very healthy, and it does detox people from heavy metals and stuff like that. But there's no evidence that you need to do those things, especially shave your head to stop the directed energy weapons. There's no evidence for that. Okay. In fact, a lot of the things that targeted individuals could be dealing with could be purely spiritual. And when you have situations where targets will be involved in scenarios where they are around certain people who are not only involved in witchcraft but drugs, and all of a sudden they start experiencing gang stalking, what does that suggest? There's a huge spiritual element to this whole thing. Okay, there is a lot of spiritual activity involved in gang stalking. It's not all damn technology and robots. Okay. You have a guy like Chris up in Great Falls, Montana, who when he goes off and does something, maybe falls off the wagon or something, he starts getting all kinds of attention. Okay, that's not by mistake. The government doesn't care whether he falls off the wagon. They don't care about that. You think the government's trying to straighten you up? That's part of the gaslighting. I've run into targets who believe stuff like that. Oh, they're just trying to help me. It's easier to swallow something like that than to believe in the maniacal evils around you. That's part of the gaslighting framework. It's easy to believe the lies that these people are telling you. Oh, we're just trying to help you. You're just imagining all these things. You're just mentally ill. The world couldn't be that crazy. Okay? Oh, no, there's no hell. All those things are just morbid. They're making you crazy. And people believe it. They buy into the whole thing and they become processed. And like I said earlier, the whole point to this, the whole point of your existence is that after you go through this testing ground, you're either going to heaven or hell. Don't forget that. Okay. The hope of the targeted individual is that you're going to be delivered from this and you're going to go to heaven. Okay. At the return of the Lord, this is going to be over. Period. It's not, and who's going to be elected as president. It's not, and not that it would be a bad thing that a whistleblower would come forward or whatever. We have full disclosure. The chances of that are probably pretty slim. That'd be great. But, there's something bigger at stake here, and that is your eternal destiny. Okay. When you're moving through this matrix of gang stalking and you see all the things out there that you are missing out on, how does that work? Okay, when you experience the injustice and deprivation that all targeted individuals deal with, how do you process that information? It's not fair. If this was it, there would be no hope, right? What hope would you have against a military-industrial complex, right? A huge government cabal that could do all these things to you with supercomputers and everything, and you'd be screwed, right? Everything is being taken. And, as I've mentioned before, you have Psalm 73 and other places in the Bible that talk about, how there's the prosperity of the wicked, right? I mean, you really made a mistake as a Christian. If those things are true, you'd have been better off being a drug dealer or a pimp or something, right? And look at the people around you, which is another thing involved in gang stalking, is that subjection that you were dealing with, in the sense that you have that lateral comparison methodology, that it does seem like you're missing out on everything, right? And they'll rub your nose in it too. How's that working out for you? I don't have to worry about this stuff. Or they'll try to gaslight the targeted individual and believing they're a second-class citizen or some kind of freak that deserves this stuff, right? And it moves into areas of disinformation with blood type and all these different things that are basically nothing more than ways to indoctrinate the targeted individual into looking like they have a persecutory delusion or a delusion of grandeur, right? And, as they move through this whole thing, then everything is after them. All right. The accident scenes are being set up for them. The firemen are after them. Everybody's after them. And they don't, they're being harassed, but they have to understand what they're surrounded by. Okay. And the lateral comparisons and all that stuff out there that is being used to manipulate the world into believing that they've succeeded, or believing that they've been damned by God, is nothing more than coercion. It's nothing more than a matrix of manipulation. Okay, it works both ways. The target is being deprived, and they're being harassed and denied justice. Right. What's the suggestion that God is forsaken them, or that there is no God, or that God has lost, or something, whatever, however you want to look at that, it's a lie, and it is being propagated through that type of methodology, that matrix of manipulation. What about the people that think they've succeeded? Well, I don't have to worry about anything. Oh yeah, we're harassing you, but we're not going to get caught. We don't have to worry about that because you're just wrong, right? There is, this is hell. You're in hell. We don't have to worry about that. I don't believe those things. Well, are they just going to get away with it? Right? We're going to drive you crazy. You're the one that loses. Is it true? No, it's not. Why? The word of God says it's not true. Okay, back to the framework, back to the foundation of what you have to know to deal with this matrix of gang stalking, right? What's your hope? There's going to be ultimate justice. Okay, God is going to take care of these things. People are going to be dealt with. It's all going to be brought to light eventually. As you're moving through the landscape of a targeted individual, and people are harassing you and teasing you and torturing you and taunting you, it's tempting to get angry. It's tempting you're tempted to get emotional. You're tempted to buy the lie of what's happening, but you have to see the truth. Okay, like I said, if the lamp is good, everything is going to be illuminated, right? And they're in darkness. Okay, you don't have to hope at that point that God is going to work these things out. It's inevitable, right? And when you see these people attacking you and doing all these things, you know what's going to happen. You don't have to get emotional, right? You don't have to. It's just a matter of time, period. Okay? You can see what's going to happen in this whole thing. You know the end result, okay? But the whole idea is to manipulate you in the meantime. The whole idea is to get you into that place of emotional currency and false proposition, because a lot of people believe the lie. A lot of people will get angry with God, or a lot of people will believe that the word of God isn't true, right? I've seen that. I've seen that a lot, right? And that's the tyranny of the environment. That's the matrix of manipulation around everyone, right? They think they've succeeded. Well, I don't know. How's that working out for you as a Christian, right? I don't have to worry about that. I've got everything I need. I don't need anything. I'm rich. I'm happy. I don't have insomnia. I don't have any. Demons aren't attacking me. Boy, you're crazy. Well, they've been deceived, and they might not be experiencing any persecution or anything. Just like the Bible says, as you play the flute for the serpent, it shall surely not bite. Right? As you're playing that little song and taming the snake, taming the serpent, it's not going to bite you. But as soon as you stop playing that, it's eventually going to happen, right? And so these people are completely and perfectly deceived, right? The individuals who are out there that think they've succeeded and they throw that whole thing out of their framework, they're going to end up in hell. That's not my opinion. It's what the Bible says. People who are involved in gang stalking and they're doing these things, if they don't repent, they're going to go to hell. Okay. And the whole thing that you have to remember is that the plausible deniability, the attacks that the targeted individuals are dealing with, the framework, the sensitization, all those things are connected. Okay, even the government programs and all that stuff is connected together. And if you don't see that, you're missing the forest for the trees, right? You're not gonna make it through it until you understand that, because you're going to be manipulated, and the danger of you to be gaslighted and taken into an area of futility and false propositions is always going to be there. That's the goal. Okay. Being harassed is inevitable, but being manipulated isn't. Okay. Now I'm going to go out and see who's in the comments. Looks like we got our moderator, Nicholas Bosman. Welcome to the live stream, Jason. Looks like you came in here earlier, and yeah, I just scheduled it for 8 o'clock. And like I said, I started it quite a bit earlier because there's just too many things going on around here, and I figured I better get it going. Okay, Jose Gomez says, no disrespect, Dr. D, but being told Jesus is the only solution, it makes me believe this is brainwashing. Well, I don't know what you're talking about there. I mean, Jesus is the solution in the sense that if you're not in Christ, and unless you don't believe the Bible, you're going to go to hell. Okay, if you, I don't know what you think the solution is, Jose. Okay, but if you think that being in Christ or believing in Jesus is brainwashing, you're on a pretty bad trajectory there, brother man. No offense to you. Okay, no offense meant, but if you got a problem with Jesus, you're really going to have a lot of problems. I run into that all the time. But everybody's on their journey, and everybody has a choice to make, and that's kind of the whole point. Actually, that's a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. Is that people can be taken into that area of propositional tyranny where they believe that stuff is not true, right? They believe that Christians are crazy, or they believe that there's no hell, or they start believing in reincarnation, or they start believing in astrology, or they start believing in the whole mental illness thing, and that the government's just trying to help them, and that everybody's gonna go to heaven. It's universalism, and I don't know, all that stuff is crazy. And the Bible was just written by a bunch of people who are dehydrated out in the desert. And what happens? Well, they've gone away from the truth of the Bible, right? The law of zero effect is what? If that's not true, it doesn't matter. I ran into this guy the other day, and he said, well, I don't know, I had a dream about reincarnation, and I was told that everybody's gonna be okay, and there's no judgment, and it was beautiful and peaceful, and now my life is good and I'm happy and all this. And I said, okay, well, think about it this way. If that's true, then it doesn't matter. You got the law of zero effect. But if you're wrong and that's not true, and you don't seek the Lord while you have time, what's going to happen? You're going to go to hell, aren't you? Well, yeah, but that doesn't matter. Well, it matters. Like I said, it matters what you believe, right? It totally matters. And that's a good example of what I'm talking about. When people get taken into the area where they're believing things that are false, you're done. That was the whole point in doing this to you. That's the whole point in harassing someone and subjecting them to all this tyranny that is around them to get them to believe something that's not true, right? A lot of people get that way. You're surrounded by people who will deny Jesus all day long. Okay, they will. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe that that's the only way to heaven. I don't believe that because if that was true, most people are going to hell. Well, the Bible's pretty clear on that, right? And like I said, at the end of the day, you have to use zero effect, because if you don't, well, you're going to be in trouble. It's like playing chess, right? If you don't have to worry about something, if it's all going to just work out and it doesn't matter, that's fine. It's the thing that you got to worry about that you need to put on your plate, right? It's always the same. It's always the same. Every time you run into something that comes up against the knowledge of the truth, it's going to be self-refuting, right? It's like the government stuff. If that's all that's going on, there's nothing you can do about it anyway. What's your point, right? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, now you're the one that looks ridiculous, right? And it's like that with heaven and hell. It's all that. Well, if there's no hell, then you're just going to die, and you're not going to know anything. It's like going to bed. You're just going to go to sleep, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, what if it's wrong? Well, I guess you're going to go to hell, aren't you? That's pretty bad. Yeah. It always works. It's always self-refuting. It's like the Calvinism. If Calvinism is true, it doesn't really matter, because God's the one that decided everything, and it's all going to work out exactly the same. It doesn't matter what I believe, right? Well, yeah, but okay, it doesn't matter then. So what's your point? It's always self-refuting, guys. Anytime you come up against something that rises up against the knowledge of the truth, the culpability is always there, and the culpability is that it's always self-refuting. It's always ridiculous, right? There's always a whole plate of criteria that people are shoveling in, and they're going to be judged for it. Okay, it's like when you get into the secret societies where you deal with witchcraft, right? Why do you think they have those weird rituals and oaths and stuff like that at Freemasonry, and they're drinking blood and they're doing all this weird stuff, and they're putting spells on people and they're getting involved in things, and they're denying the truth of the Bible? What's the point of any of that anyway? Because it's criteria, right? It's culpability, right? When the Bible says not to do something and you do it anyway, there's gonna be a way to accuse somebody at that point, right? It's like when people look at the world now and they see the framework that is out there, and they just, well, it's got to be coincidence, even though the Bible prophesied these things are going to happen, and you can literally take a calculator and prove it, along with the immorality and the gender confusion and everything that the Bible prophesied. Is just must be a coincidence. it's just a freak coincidence, man. It had nothing to do with the Bible being true, right? That's culpability, because you can see it with your eyes, right? There's no getting out of it. Okay, moving into the comment section again. Okay, let's see here. Chris, welcome to the live stream. Rebecca, welcome to the live stream. JDO, welcome to the live stream. Okay. And I'm just moving through here. And I'm going to let you guys bring something up here. And I want you guys to start asking some questions and get in here. And we'll kind of go off the comments for a while. And I'll start looking into things that I could build on. Rebecca says, wear their rejection like a badge of honor. I agree with that. That's a good one, Rebecca, because you don't want to be part of this, right? You don't want to be, look at it. Like I said, you have that lateral comparison methodology and all that stuff that you seem to be missing out on, and that sucks. It sucks to be harassed as a target individual. It sucks to deal with deprivation. It sucks to, deal with the plausible deniability of gang stalking, where you're harassed and people just think you're nuts and all this stuff. And it's not easy. But, if the Bible talks about that too, if you were one of them, they'd welcome you in, right? A lot of targets talk like, oh, I don't know, I'm thinking about going over to the other side. Are you sure? They might just laugh at you. I've seen that before. I've heard people talk about that kind of stuff. And you don't have the you don't have the psychology to do it anyway. But consider what they're doing, right? Would you be able to live with yourself if you were going to, attack someone to the point where you're involved in that death by 1,000 cuts to drive someone to suicide or a mass shooting or something? That's how reckless gang stalking is. Not only does it make people distracted to the point where they could hurt themselves or, become depressed or the exponential butterfly effect damage that comes out of someone being traumatized and subjected to something that's going to drive them nuts. But what if they hurt themselves or somebody else? They don't care. They don't care about that. And for them to deny that's a possibility is it's a lie, right? It's all about convenience at that point. Oh, they'll try to do that too. They'll try to obfuscate the seriousness of what's happening because, the incremental attacks that targets deal with, people, they kind of lie to themselves. Wow, I just, yanked your chain a little bit. Yeah, but that was like, the 100th attack that the target dealt with that day, right? It all started out at their apartment complex and the noise campaign the night before. And then, they got attacked on their way out to the vehicle. They got harassed on their way to work. They got harassed at work. They got harassed at lunch or whatever. They got harassed by their boss. They freaked out and got called out in front of a bunch of people. And then everybody's saying they're crazy. And then you come along and just put the final, it's just, that's how it works. But, the whole framework of plausible deniability and that death by 1,000 cuts, they think somehow that what they've done, that little insignificant little part of driving you crazy is not going to get them judged, but it will. It will. It's murder, right? It's totally murder. And it's targets who targets who underestimate this stuff find out after about 2-3 years into this whole thing, it becomes a reality, and then you start getting depressed. And then you start looking at, living your life as a targeted individual. And it's like I've talked about before with targets that, because some of them, they get harassed and threatened and everything. It's like, I don't know, should I get a gun? I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. You can make that decision for yourself, because there's so much volatility around the target that not only could you end up using that and regretting it, you could use it on yourself. Okay. And I would, if you think your life's in danger or whatever, you might look into some less lethal devices and stuff like that you can use to protect yourself, because sometimes you do get attacked as a target individual, but you're definitely going to get threatened. Okay. I think they have those less lethal air pistols. Some of them are pretty darn deadly. I mean, in fact, if you shoot somebody in the wrong spot with one of those, the powerful ones, not the 15 joule ones, you can kill them. And I think the most powerful one is called the Grimberg, and it's probably between $400 and $500. They're a lot more expensive than regular pistols, but that thing's like 40 joules of power. So for people out there who are wondering how powerful a less lethal device is, that shoots either rubber balls or steel balls or pepper balls or some type of projectile. And usually the range is, pretty, they're not going to get close to you. Your average paint gun is probably around 5 joules, between 5 and 10. That stings, most of the less lethal pistols are around 15 joules, right? So it'll leave a nice welt on you. The Grimberg, that's 40 joules. If you hit somebody in the chest, you can kill them. If you shoot somebody, that's on where the bone is exposed, it'll shatter the bone. If you shoot them in the head, you're going to crack their skull more than likely. Okay, so there's options out there for you if you are scared and you think, I don't know, I'm afraid for my life. Dr. De facto, I think I might have to get a firearm. There's other options. Okay, and there's other things. Even I think they have a shotgun too, to where that thing will knock anybody down, and that shoots the same kind of projectiles. The only bad thing about it is they're very expensive. They're, most of the less lethal devices are, at least between $300 and $500. And I think those shotguns, I can't remember what those ones are, but those are probably at least $500. But that, that would pretty much do it. But, getting back to the negligibility of these attacks, targets get freaked out to the point where who knows what's going to happen, right? I mean, it is murder. So, you don't want to be welcomed in to that crowd, and their rejection of you is a compliment. I would agree with Rebecca. I'm going to take a look at some of the other comments out there. Okay. And Steve the Pigeon says, I'm still getting hit heavy with the noise campaigns daily in my apartment. It's mental how relentless they are doing this day after day. That's true. And that's an important point, Steve, that, targets are subjected to constant harassment. It's like the menagerie that I talk about all the time, or the death by 1,000 cuts, is that, some of the stuff is just there to get in your head, right? Like I've talked about, the whole idea of targets being under constant surveillance, or the idea that, everybody's reading your mind, or there's a supercomputer that's reading your mind. And now you can't even think. You can't even just have the privacy of your own mind. And that's not good. That's the same thing that Steve is dealing with, in the sense that it's constant, right? It's, they want to do that. And, the sensitization moves into the area where not only are you prepped and psychologically, invaded in the point where you're processing information differently, or you have those objects of significance and stimuli that they can use to communicate you with, but the sensitization moves into an area where now you get jumpy, right? And you got all these chemicals running through your body. You're in that state of fight or flight. They've hijacked your survival mechanism, and now it's just once they get you going, they just keep it that way. It's like the trauma of war. Just wear you out, give you that adrenal fatigue, keep you awake, sleep deprivation, fear, all kinds of social deprivation, constant speculation about what's going to happen, hopelessness and despair that is never going to go away. And all these things are just they're taking everything, they're getting away with it. And then you got to deal with it. And there's always something there to remind you. And like I said, some of it is mental invasion, and some of it is just there to create those associations. And then all they have to do is, like Steve talked about, that noise campaign is just, constantly bark at you. Right. And then, of course, all those other things are going to be there to create that toxic mental soup that you live in as a target individual. That's what they want. And I've talked about the fact that you want to cancel as much of that out as possible, not only realizing what I talked about is, using that biblical framework in the sense that they're going to be dealt with. Okay, don't believe that they're not, ever. Don't believe there isn't going to be perfect justice. Don't believe that if they don't repent, your picture isn't going to be etched into the wall of their dungeon. It will be. Okay, that's if you're a Christian, Steve, I'm assuming you are. There's gonna be a lot of graffiti of you down there where they are, because if they don't repent, that's part of their condemnation. Okay, don't believe for a minute that it's and I've talked about that before. The kingdom of darkness, they're coming after you to get you, but they are also getting them with you, because they're getting them to attack you, and they're going to get judged for it. Okay, and if you know that, that's going to cancel out some of the emotional effect that you're going to get on this, and also knowing that this isn't everything, and that when you look at the biblical framework of the apostles, or a lot of the people, not so much always in the Old Testament, because that was an external covenant where people experienced a lot of physical blessings, but in the New Covenant, one like that. Okay, you have all the apostles. I don't even think any of them owned a house. Okay. And most of them died, of horrible deaths. They were persecuted and tortured. John the Revelator was boiled in oil and set out on an island, man. Paul, his head was cut off. Peter was hung upside down on a cross. I think Stephen was stoned. Some of the other apostles, they were drugged around by animals until they died. Some people died in the Greek games and stuff like that, the Roman games, Colosseums. Some of them were lit on fire. Okay, and so it would be easy for anybody to come up to you and just, well, no, that's not what it is. You're missing out, right? God has forgot about you. He is, well, no, we have the framework. Right. So what's the hope is after this, right? And it's not to say that this can't stop. It's not to say that God couldn't change it anyway. And the thing that you have as far as the promises in the Bible is that God is going to give you times of refreshment, and that even in the midst of the persecution that you're experiencing, and if you trust in God, He's going to give you that peace that surpasses all understanding. That's going to guard your heart and your mind in Christ, right? So the people that get involved in false religions, they get regulated by spirits to give them that counterfeit peace. You've seen that, right? And it's always like that. Or you have the type of feeding frenzy that targeted individuals deal with, in the sense that the perps are just getting off on this stuff. They seem to get a kick out of it. It's like they get energy. It's almost tempting to believe they're feeding on you. And it feels like it, Yeah, I've had that happen to me before, when I get attacked, I react or something. And if I feel like I got a flu for 3 days, and they're laughing, licking their fingers, that was good. Yum. And you're like, oh man. And it's just, but what, eventually that's not going to work out. Okay, you got me. But that's not going to be the end of this. So having that framework and knowing what's going on is gonna cancel out this whole thing. You got to clean house and realize that you're being manipulated too. And if you believe that somebody is reading your mind all the time, or that there's a supercomputer out there that's constantly, looking through your eyes or whatever, I don't believe there's proof of that. And I believe that there's a lot of demonic illusions. And I believe that some of that stuff is disinformation. And even if they do have that kind of thing, it came from the spiritual dimension, and he can cancel all that out. And if you're worried, if you're one of those targets who, you feel like you're on the Truman Show and you feel like all these things are happening and you have no rest and you're dealing with that constant subjection where you can't relax, then you need to realize that you're no different from anybody else. If there are cameras in your house, if there is something weird going on like that, they are the ones that need to be ashamed. They are the ones that are the freaks, okay? And not you. And they want you to move into that place of propositional tyranny where you believe that they're always reading your mind or watching you shower or, watching you in your most intimate moments or constantly surveilling you or whatever. And it's a psych job, and it's done to get you into the place where you're tormented. And you have to remember that when you do the spiritual framework of this whole thing, that like I gave that hypothetical example of that individual moving into the crowd of people, they throw thoughts in the guy's mind or the girl's mind, and then they start throwing thoughts into their mind, and they start talking about something, and the individual believes that they've got to be reading my mind. That's how they know. You don't understand, Dr. De Facto. It was exact. Well, I believe it was. Okay, I believe some of that stuff is going on. But it might not be what you think. It might not be what you think. And you got to get to the place where you clean house. You don't care what other people think. Like Rebecca said, consider it a compliment, right? It's like when targets, I don't know, these people are watching me. They're probably sitting around talking about how paranoid I am. If they're watching you with hidden cameras or, surveilling you or whatever, that would be pretty ridiculous for them to accuse you of being paranoid, wouldn't it? Right? So, the propositional tyranny that comes at targeted individuals is important to address. And here's another example. If you're walking around or you're going through your daily life, listening to what other people are talking about, or sitting around, making eye contact with everybody, trying to figure out if they're looking at you, or, trying to figure out where the next harassment is, you're making the mistake. Okay. I get it. I understand why you're like that. And I understand what you're dealing with is real, but you're playing into their strategy. Okay, you cannot do that. That's part of the gaslighting. It's part of the Gangstalking Matrix to get you looking for this stuff, to get you sensitized to all these things that are around you, the menagerie, the themes that are already there, and to put you in that place of constant subjection, like Steve was talking about. You're in an apartment complex or you're in a neighborhood where you're dealing with that. That's the point. And the point of that propositional tyranny is to keep you into a place where you're constantly tormented. You're constantly in a place where they can agitate you, whether they're there or not. Whether the red car and the white car are there to chase you around is irrelevant. You should not be looking for it. You shouldn't be looking for one-headlighted vehicles. You should not be listening to the conversations that are around you. You should not care what they are doing, because they are eventually going to go to hell. And they're not working in alignment with the rules of the universe or anything that you should pay attention to. And they have made themselves insignificant, not only by their decision to gangstalk you, but the fact that they're just, insignificant, evil, and childish. I'm going to move into the comments again here. Okay. Okay, let's see here. And on average, Joe says, for those of you dealing with family betraying you, just know that you're not alone, and soon you'll be redeemed. That's true, and that's important to remember that. And I've talked about that before. That the demonic framework that you're dealing with is it's important to realize the techniques that are being used concerning the reciprocity of associations and triggers that targeted individuals are dealing with concerning emotional manipulation. Okay, when you got family involved If family can be whatever, however you process that, whether you think they're getting paid by the damn CIA or whether you believe demonic stuff is going on, whatever, the thing to remember is that is used purposefully. Okay. There's a thin line between love and hate, and the surreal emotional manipulation that comes out of that whole thing, and the triggers that are involved in family members and associations are important. Okay, it's going to be easy for you to be triggered if you don't see what's going on, because a lot of times targets will be set up, and I've talked about some of the sophisticated gaslighting and role playing that goes on in gang stalking. Some of it's purely puppetry, and some of the time people are involved in it. They'll set you up purposefully. And when you're dealing with a family scenario, especially for targets out there who have been driven to an area of dysfunction where they need financial help, or usually, if nothing else, targets are in a vulnerable place emotionally, right? And you're forced into that place where you either, as I talked about in the last live stream, I think I erased it though, where you might even hang out with perps because you just can't stand the silence. You can't stand maybe the voices. You can't deal with the isolation or whatever. And they'll do that. They'll torment targets and get them into the place of dysfunction or emotional destitution to the point where, the only people they're surrounded by, whether it's family or whatever, they're going to be involved in it. The elephant's in the middle of the room. You can't say anything. It's just a completely awkward, uncomfortable, frustrating scenario to be in. And you got to be the Hollywood targeted individual and pretend everything's okay, which you're already doing anyway, if you're smart. Okay. And it's surreal. And a lot of people, that's all it takes to get them into a psychosis. That's all it takes with the lateral comparisons of the framework that they were raised, the expectations that they had as a child to believe that they're either justified in being angry with God, they're justified in losing their mind, going out and shooting a bunch of people, or they're justified in doing all this other stuff because look at how crazy this is. You don't understand how crazy this is. It was always there. Okay, that's one of the things you have to remember, that this whole idea that that there is no spiritual dimension, that these things don't exist, they're all conspiracy theories concerning the government programs, all that stuff is just there to obfuscate the truth. And really, if you're going to look at this accurately, targeted individuals are shoved into reality. Okay, I mean the experience that you're having is unadulterated, raw reality. Okay. You're seeing what's really there. The people out there that don't know what you're dealing with, that look at you like you're crazy, they don't have any idea the things that are really there. And they'll use that shock and awe to take you into a place where they can get you to disassociate or go into a psychosis or feel justified in doing something horrible. Okay. And that's part of the manipulation. But using that type of framework, like Joe was talking about, that family members are involved now, all the associations from your past are connected to the harassment, right? Because if you have a memory, for example, about Christmas, oh, that was fun, and oh, that was nice, or you smell a Christmas tree or turkey cooking or whatever kind of association is going to have that reciprocity. Now you're going to be thinking about the family member and now it's going to go all the way back to gang stalking, which is going to involve anxiety and depression and all that stuff. And that's what they want. They want you to, stay in. That's why you have to remember that this isn't everything. Okay. And you're going to constantly be faced with that dilemma to go back. And I'm sorry you don't believe in Jesus, Jose, or that he's a solution, but you're going to constantly be going back into there and say, well, this is horrible. What is my hope? Your hope is Jesus. Your hope is heaven. Your hope is redemption, like average Joe said. Yeah, that is your hope, and you're going to be constantly and lovingly confronted with that reality. Okay, you have to realize that that's a blessing, raw, unadulterated reality. And rather than my hope is in that I'm going to have a successful career, or all this is going to happen, or there's going to be a loss. No, your hope is in the redemption and the mercy of God. And that's where this whole thing goes every time you're going to be confronted with it, because your whole environment is going to be filled with that tyranny around you. And every time you try and get going, it seems like you have to start over. Every time you get something figured out, it seems like they come and smash the sandcastle, and it's over and over and over again. And you're going to have to look at that as manipulation, and you're going to have to be confronted with that reality that your hope is in Christ, your hope is in redemption, your hope is not in all these memories of past Christmases gone by, and that you can start a family and die somewhere out in a condo in Brady Bunch 2.0, and that you've succeeded. You're going to end up in front of the throne of God, the white throne judgment, and you're either going to heaven or hell. Okay. And these people that supposedly are getting away with this stuff and have had these successful lives or whatever, or that are looking at you like you're nuts, they have no idea. They have no idea. It's raw and adulterated reality for the target individual. Okay, let's see what else is out here in the comments. Steve the Pigeon says, I wear headphones in my apartment the majority of the time, trying to cancel out a lot of. That's a good idea. That's a great strategy, Steve. That's a great one there, because sometimes that's all you can do as a targeted individual, and they will get aggressive. And I've even heard that before. There was a guy that I used to talk to up in Canada that he would get all the direct conversations. He would be dealing with all this stuff, and there was a point where he would just try to kind of remove himself geographically away from the people who were doing this stuff. Right? They follow him around, right? Or they would get louder, right? They would start speaking louder, and it's aggressive. And so, if you're one of those people who, the apartments are, that's a real bad scenario. And I feel bad for you, Steve. My heart goes out to you. I think we talked about this before, and all the other target individuals are going to listen to this. Apartment complexes, you're surrounded, and you got to get used to that. And it's almost surreal in the sense that you got to get used to, dealing with that and that sensitization that I was talking about earlier. When bam, they hit the wall, it seems like they're following you around your apartment. They'll yell through the vents, they'll yell through the walls, they'll do all kinds of stuff. They'll stand out in front of your window and talk and laugh or whatever. They'll wake you up. All these things are happening. But if you try and do whatever you can, you try to ignore it. You might try to find a solution, getting out of there and getting into a different apartment. But if nothing else, put on some damn headphones, right? If you don't hear it, it's not going to bother you, right? If you don't see, if you're not looking at what they're doing, it's not gonna piss you off because you're not looking at it. A lot of targets end up, going off grid or to trying to go out in the country to get away from everything, and you can't blame them, right? But you might not have that opportunity, and you don't necessarily have to. You get to the point where you can tune it out. For me, I could totally tune this stuff out. I don't, most of the time I'm in my own little world. You have to come up and literally, grab a hold of me to get my attention, because I am totally ignoring pretty much everything around me that I don't have to pay attention to. And I'm also aware of what's happening. And the thing that you're going to have to realize as a target individual, they're going to do this stuff to you. But if you don't react the way they want you to, right, which is important in your strategy, in the sense that if you use it as criteria to prevent the gaslighting, if they're using, it's like I've talked about before, if you're getting an obvious day of harassment that's very aggressive, instead of being frustrated and angry, be happy, because they're going to have a hell of a time gaslighting you and convincing you you're crazy if you have that stuff in your memory. Gang stalking isn't true. You're just crazy. Right? You need meds or whatever. Well, I don't know. I remember that one day, this or that happened, and there's no damn way that was mental illness. And they can't gaslight you at that point. They've destroyed their own attempts to drive you crazy. They might be able to convince everybody around you that you're nuts, but they're not going to be able to convince you anymore, because you know what's happening. Consistently going across the line, consistently being aggressive. And then they'll back off and then, try to get you to, read into stuff and then accuse you of being nuts. But if you don't do it, eventually they're going to do it again, right? You start to step out and take chances and, form relationships, and you get bold, or, start trying to, improve your career or whatever, and they got to do it again. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop? They have to do it. But instead of, getting all angry or whatever, just turn that negative into a positive, and realize that it can be used against them. And then you can just, be entertained by the whole thing too. If they see that, If they see that you understand what they're trying to do, that you understand they're trying to manipulate you, that you understand they're trying to get in your head and all that, and it's not working, that they're just making themselves look ridiculous and they're being obvious and it's not working, they're gonna have to change, and they will literally stop doing it. Right? They'll try to take you by surprise at that point. Usually, and I've noticed that because I've been doing this for decades, is that you get to that point where you're expecting it or you're ready to deal with it, and then they'll just all change. Right? I mean, the whole menagerie, the whole Gangstalking Matrix will change around the target individual. People being nice to you. Oh, let me open the door for you. All this. Oh, how are you doing? The birds are chirping, and what a wonderful day, and this, that, and the other. And then they'll start treating you nice, and you start caring what people think, and then they'll do it all over again because they have to get you emotionally invested in the landscape that they are in control of. And when you know that, there's really not a whole lot they can do except really aggressive stuff. And a lot of targets will deal with that, whether they're dealing with the fuming or the covert poisoning or food tampering or the people breaking in or doing it, because they really don't, they can't mess with your head anymore. It's actually a compliment, right? Because it's like Steve, he's dealing with all that weird stuff. They can't play with his head anymore. They just gotta try and yank his chain, man. So now he just puts on his headphones and he just completely ignores it, and they're doing it all for nothing. And like I said, eventually they're going to be judged. That's a good one though, Steve. Okay. All right. Ernie, welcome to the live stream. Okay. All right. On average, Joe said something interesting here. I'm going to have to go into this one. And on average, Joe says, however, you are not required to forgive them if you choose not to. That's between the perp and the creator. And once the family betrays, that's it. They are perp sellouts. Okay. That's interesting. That's interesting. And I get what you're talking about. I think there's an accidental conflation going on in that, and we're gonna look at that for a minute, because you don't have to be somebody's doormat. So I think that's probably what on average Joe's talking about, in the sense that if somebody's constantly messing with you, you don't have to give them a million chances, in the sense that you make yourself vulnerable if you do not see that they are trying to change and that they are honest and sincere when they apologize or whatever is going on, right? But you do forgive them in the sense that you do not hold it against them or try to pay them back, and you do that for you, though. You are doing that for you, because you don't want to sit around and be angry and pissed off and bitter and so on and so forth about what they did. You hand it over to the Lord. You just realize they're being manipulated. You realize that they've given in, right? And they're part of whatever. And but to look at it in the sense that you're not forgiving them, you are forgiving them, but it doesn't mean that you have to make yourself vulnerable to them. Okay, I think that would be a better way to put that, Joe. And it's unfortunate, but what he said about it's between them and the creator at that point, it will be anyway. Okay, because they've technically it's like David. He didn't go around making restitution with everybody when he made his mistake. He settled his account with God, because that's really what's important. God will take care of the rest, right? So they're going to be accountable to God. You're accountable to God, and I'll leave it at that. But you don't have to make yourself available to be a doormat. And I see that a lot with especially believer targeted individuals. They are taken into a place where the whole idea is that they will take the scriptures out of context and get you into the place where you just have to turn the other cheek all the time and you can't stand up for yourself. That's not what the Bible is communicating. It's not communicating passivity. It's not communicating you being a doormat. It's communicating having an attitude of forgiveness, in the sense that you're not being hypocritical. And but at the same time, you have to realize that the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount that was primarily for the Jews, that they thought they were perfect and justified before God in their own righteousness and works. And so Jesus had to remind them, and in so many different ways, that they are not going to be justified under the law, and that they needed a Messiah, and that they were responsible in recognizing that he was the Messiah. But of course, they were made dull, and they did not learn of the prophets and of God in John 6, and they did not recognize their time of visitation. And he was trying to show them with the miracles and fulfilling all those things and all the scriptures that he would say, and today this scripture is fulfilled in your sight. And they were there, they didn't know what was going on. And then they wanted to stone him and kill him and all that other stuff. But as far as the Beatitudes, plucking out your eye or cutting off your hand or giving all that you own to a stranger that asks you, that is just referencing the fact that human beings are never going to be justified under the law. Okay. And that you need a Messiah. Because what happens if you pluck out one of your eyes, you're going to just sin with the other one, right? You got to pluck that one out too. Okay, what if your right hand caused you to sin? Your left hand is going to cause you to sin. We might as well just kill you at that point, because so the whole point is that it's impossible, right? The whole title of that sermon is, "This is the impossible sermon," and you better have a Messiah, because you're not going to be able to do it unless you plan on cutting off all your body parts and killing yourself, which is obviously not a solution. So people will take that stuff out of context, and targets are subjected to well, you got to forgive me, you got to do this. Okay, I forgive you, but I'm not going to let you sit around and abuse me either. Okay, you don't get that privilege. So we'll just take that into that area. Yeah, Matson Miles has got a good one. I think we've talked about this before. He says, "How do you deal with the fuming? Tough thing to ignore. I mean, I have to breathe the air." That's a good point. Target individuals are subjected to things in their environment, right? So Steve brought up the fact that he's got to deal with, that subjection. The Matson Miles is talking about getting fumed, which is like what? How many breaths do you take a minute? That's how many times do you breathe in? That's what happens, right? And so the mind games with Matson are kind of futile. I would imagine that he's moved into that area where he's graduated from, street theater and all those other games. There's probably still some of that going on, but for the most part, he's dealing with the heavy stuff, and things like fuming or whatever. That's pretty tough, because it's like he said, what are you going to do? You got to breathe, right? And my heart goes out to you. Targets deal with that stuff. It's similar to the things that happen with the demonic attacks that targets deal with, which sometimes that could be demonic too. You don't know. You don't know whether you're dealing with some kind of a device that's implanted somewhere in your house or whatever. They put it in your mattress or whatever, and there you are. You're sitting there covered over with your blanket, and you think that your whole room is filled up with it when it's actually coming out from underneath your mattress. And there's all kinds of weird things they do. They'll get in your house, and I think Masson's talked about seeing things that look like they've gone in there and redone the sheetrock or whatever, and you just don't know. You don't know whether you're dealing with something demon or you're dealing with some type of technology or whatever, but the constant subjection is the key, and it's torment. It's delegated and thoughtfully planned out torment, and that's definitely one I've dealt with. That's not fun. A lot of targets deal with things that are like directed energy weapon attacks, and that's the same. You're dealing with things that are impacting your quality of life in a very serious way, whether you feel like you can't regulate your body temperature, or you're getting woke up when you try to fall asleep. There's all kinds of weird symptomatology involved in that. People are dealing with tinnitus. They're dealing with voices. I know Nicholas Bosserman has talked about voice to skull, and it's just torment. It's constant torment. A lot of targets talk about constant V2K, where they're dealing with things, and it's always like that. The targeted individual is subjected to that tyranny, and it's all designed for that breaking down of the target, their morale, to get them in a place of hopelessness, to get them in a place of demoralization, to get them in a place of bitterness and anger, to constantly remind them, to constantly trigger them. And my heart goes out to you on that one, Matson, and other target individuals dealing with that stuff, whether it's demonic voices or technology. is designed to do that. And as far as a solution, pray to God, ask Him. That's all you can do. And try to, I don't know, remember that this is going to be over eventually. And that the faithfulness of God is always something you can count on, and the fact that even though it seems like you're getting taken to the edge, He's watching out. He's watching out for you, and there's going to be times of refreshing. There's going to be times of peace and tranquility, even in the midst of the harassment. And the other thing that I'd like to mention, and I've seen a lot of targets, going in this direction, is that, and I'm not saying that this is justified. Don't take me wrong on what I'm about to say, that somehow this stuff is justified in your life. But I see a lot of targets not living properly according to the biblical criteria. They might be living in fornication. They might be messing around with illegal drugs or something like that, or whatever. You don't want to do that. Okay. And, some people, it's like I mentioned Chris earlier, they kind of walk off the path and things get worse. Okay. So you don't want any excuse out there. You don't want anything left undone in your life. You want to be walking according to what God expects of you as best you can. He understands weaknesses. He understands problems. If you have maybe an addiction or a propensity or something like that, rather than to drive yourself crazy and assume that that's why you're being gang stalked, because a lot of that could be manufactured justification. Just bring that before the Lord and talk to Him about it, and just say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I need help. I had a friend that he would talk about, the alcohol thing. Well, there's forgiveness and mercy, because the Bible says, drunkards and fornicators, that they're not going to have any inheritance in the kingdom of God. He said, well, what am I going to do? It's the only time I feel happy. I said, okay, well, are you trying? What do you mean? I said, okay, well, there's mercy and forgiveness, but it seems like you're getting up every day and just giving into this, right? You're just giving into the alcohol. When's the last time you tried to sober up? Well, it's been a while. Okay. Well, there's going to be a whole lot more plausible mercy for you if you're trying and you fail. There's nothing wrong with failing. Okay. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. Right. And I said, so, it's one thing for you to get up every day and just drink and expect God to, have mercy on you. It's another thing for you to get up and try and walk through this whole thing. And if you can't do it and you fail, well, you might have 2 months here. You might have 6 months over there. You might have a few days, whatever, but at least you're trying. Okay. But because if you quit trying and you just give up or whatever, throw the towel, that's a problem. And I see a lot of targets that get to that place. And I've talked about the gaslighting and the manufactured justification involved in this whole thing, is that one of the things that the demons will do is they will get you into a place where you feel justified. Either you feel justified in getting angry with God, or deconstructing from Christianity, or going out and shooting a bunch of people or whatever. And it's not a solution. It's never a solution. Okay, that's one of the things you got to remember, that you never remove logic from the equation. Okay. But I just thought I'd bring that up because I've seen that in the target individual community where you have people talking about honeypots and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, I know what you're doing. You're out there messing around. You're fornicating, and you're probably, you have targets talk about that. Well, I just went to the bar and, we did a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And well, no wonder you got attacked, man. Demons are going to do that. They're going to get you into a place where they have leeway and they're going to get you. It's important to realize the spiritual foundations of this stuff. Sometimes, for me, I'll get attacked. I'm not doing anything. Sometimes targets are like that. It's not to say that because you're doing something that's not perfect that you're getting attacked. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that do inventory. Is there anything going on where you need to take that to God in prayer? And because, you hear about that. You go, I got 24/7 V2K. How much time have you spent with the Lord? Are you hanging out with Jesus? Are you listening to sermons? Are you reading your Bible? No, I just believe in God, and I believe that Jesus is the one and only Son of God. Okay, well, you got to do more than that. Okay, you got to have a passion. You got to be doing things. You got to be studying. You got to be learning. You got to be drawing near to God. You got to be praying, right? And it's important. You can't be out there fornicating. You can't be out there, doing drugs or messing around or whatever, looking at porn or whatever. That's just all that stuff plays into it. And it's just that targeted individuals are you're in a spiritual battle. Okay, a lot of people just believe this is just nothing but government, but you're in a spiritual battle, and you got to remember that. Like I said, you're going to be confronted with the reality of this and the tyranny of your circumstances, and that really your only hope is Christ. Really, your only hope is redemption. It is. Okay, that'd be great. If there was a whistleblower, it would be great. And I pray for this for all the target individuals out there, at least 3 times a day, that you would be compensated, that this stuff would be brought to light, that these people would get caught before that happens. But and it'd be nice. But if it doesn't, okay, eventually, that's what you're hoping for. Okay, let's see what else is going on out here. Okay. All right. I'm just reading through here. And Nicholas Boserman says, when they fumed me, I just open up the windows and walk outside. They got something to counter that too. Yeah. Yeah, that's always something. I know. It's frustrating, man. It is. Totally is. Okay. I'm just reading through here. All right. I'm just waiting for something that I can build off of. And I'm going to go back up in the comments here. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not seeing anything right now. And I'll go back to the top. Okay. All right. Well, and I've mentioned this too, that if you guys have any prayer requests or any ideas for topics or videos for live stream or other videos, go ahead and put them in the comments. And we're talking about the Gangstalking Matrix. And we're talking about the targeted individual menagerie of manipulation in the sense that targets are subjected to that initial framework along with everybody else in society, and they are moved into that place of shock and awe, and they're taken into harassment involving a lot of different themes and methods. You have the character assassination, you have the obvious deprivation and isolation, you have the fuming and stuff like that. We talked about that. Poisonings. You have the physical and mental attacks. You even have things involving covert types of poisoning plots, and I've talked about that, where it involves gaslighting. The target individual will deal with people, getting in their house, doing things, putting things on surfaces, just freaking them out if nothing else, invading their space. You have a lot of emotional manipulation, threats, directed conversations, innuendos, street theater. You got people being bullied in traffic, being bullied at work. You have people being sensitized to the point where they're afraid to socialize, they're afraid to even leave their house, or they get to the point of dysfunction where they need disability. They get into a place of propositional tyranny where they don't really know what's happening, or they start to believe things are happening that are not. And that just feeds into the emotional and mental manipulation and degradation that targets deal with. Acceptance of this whole thing is important as long as it does not involve the indoctrinated false information that's going to lead to further propositional tyranny, sensitization, and psychosis. Okay. Understanding that your ego is at the center of your being, and they're going to try to manipulate you into feeling like you're playing a game. In fact, I think I saw someone mention that earlier, where you have Michael Douglas in The Game, which is a good movie. That's a good example of what targeted individuals deal with. But the whole idea is to get you into that place where they can manipulate your ego and get you into that place where you internalize this whole thing. And that's that game dynamic that involves your vanity. And that's at the foundation of the infrastructure of this whole, for everybody, this whole, menagerie of manipulation, all the things that people are chasing after, the pleasure, the prestige, because we know there's things you need and there's things you want, and usually it gets into that area. But for targets, part of that acceptance is being satisfied with the things that you need. But even then, they'll come in and just try and take away that stuff too. So it's really difficult for targets where the world, they get to the place where they're not satisfied, with things that they're taking for granted. I mean, the stuff that targets deal with is so intense compared to what, individuals out there in society are dealing with. And they want, whatever. They want the Lamborghini or the big, mansion with the swimming pool. And targets, man, you just be happy with a small house that was quiet where you're not getting attacked, and you have to realize the blessing that is involved in that, because people don't realize, what can happen. They don't realize where they're headed. They do not realize the blessings that they have. They are taking those things for granted, and they are not being conscious of the reality of Christ, the reality of the impending judgment and wrath of God. And they're taking all that stuff for granted. It's like the story of Solomon. He had all that gold and everything. And then he writes, Ecclesiastes, where, life is meaningless and, everything is chasing after the wind and so on and so forth. If he would have been targeted for a while, I think he probably would have changed his attitude. What do you guys think? It's like, wow, I can go, create a garden. So I tried to have a garden. The last time I tried to have a garden, I had people doing stuff to it, destroying it, pouring stuff on the soil over my plants, telling me they were going to give me cancer and everything. Crazy stuff that targets deal with, man. People take things for granted, and but it could be a blessing though. It could be a blessing because you can be taken to that place where God will give you rest. He will give you a time of refreshment, and not only that, you will learn to be satisfied with God's provision and be satisfied in all things like Paul talked about. Rather than sitting around crying around. Being unthankful and wanting a Lamborghini and a mansion and, all the money that Bill Gates has or whatever, if you get, whatever it is, maybe a quiet apartment or maybe a small piece of land or whatever that has a very meager dwelling, but is peaceful or whatever, you're going to feel like a king. You're going to feel like the ruler of a palace at that point after what you've gone through, and you'll be satisfied. And you'll be happy. And the people that have all that stuff, they're still chasing after more. It's never enough. There's always something on the other side of the fence, the greener grass. It's always going to be there, and they're going to be blinded to that whole thing, and they're going to be manipulated by this whole equation of vanity and futility. And that's part of the framework. We've talked about some of the themes that targets deal with, and the fact that, you're sensitized to these things, and that shock and awe takes you into that place where you feel like you're in the Truman Show. Okay. I illustrated earlier to reemphasize that some of those things are illusions. Some of that is just there to put you in that constant state of subjection where they can constantly torment you. There's a supercomputer reading your mind, that everybody is reading your mind, that everybody is watching you or looking through your eyes. Or I don't believe that. I think that a lot of this stuff is set up. I think a lot of it is demonic, and I think it's there to put you in a state of torment. And you gotta let some of that stuff go. And like I said earlier, that when you deal with some of that stuff that Duncan writes or whatever, you have to remember he is an atheist. You have to remember that he believes that less than 10% of the people out there who think they're dealing with all that stuff, whether it's the DNA resonance frequency or all these things that are controlling all these people or whatever, he believes that less than 10% of the individuals who think they're dealing with it really are. So if, it's the old strategy of where You have someone in a situation where they're dealing with a horrific type of tyranny. You give them validation, and then you say, "Well, I don't know if it's I don't know if it's really validation for you or not." And targets feel emboldened, and they will go out there and they'll start sharing this information with people. And you've got that classic dilemma: the target individual, you don't know who's in on it, and the people who don't know about it are just going to think you're crazy no matter what you've shown. And so you've got a dilemma there. But like I said, the whole thing revolves around a type of propositional tyranny, illusions and delusions. Okay, the delusion for the people out there in the world, like I just illustrated, is that they've succeeded, or that there is more, or that they don't have to worry about judgment. The propositional tyranny for the target is some of those things that they start believing that torments them when it's unnecessarily, a type of foundation in their framework. Okay, maybe people are not reading your mind. Maybe not all those people in traffic are really after you. Okay, maybe some of the stuff that's going on around you could be canceled out, like Steve said, by wearing headphones or something. And you got to just take some steps and just get rid of some of that stuff. A lot of these things are there just for that propositional tyranny, and some of them are delusions. Okay, and they're given to people for a reason, and they want to take you into that place where they can accuse you and destroy you, or they can create that emotional currency where they turn you away from the truth or turn you against God or whatever. I've also talked about the perps, and I profile those guys a lot. You'll be dealing with a lot of those. Some of the people are getting paid. Some of them are professional. Some of these people are just being manipulated demonically, and some of them are literally mindless puppets. There's a lot of coincidences around these individuals. They will usually play dumb. They will obfuscate their activity, and they will usually reframe this whole thing so they can accuse you. Okay, that's very important to realize, that when you're trying to confront gang stalkers, or you're trying to figure this stuff out, you're confronted with that dilemma. Okay, and they want to promote a type of distorted reality around you, no matter what's going on. And if they have leverage over there, they're going to use it, and you don't want to give them leverage. Okay, but what do I mean? Don't react. Okay, don't let them provoke you. Okay, don't get frustrated with their fake apologies. Oh, I didn't mean to knock over that soda and all that stuff you were working on at work. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And it's you try to get away from these people if possible, and put a hedge around yourself, in the sense that they have to invade your space and be obvious to harass you. And I've mentioned this before, that whether it's workplace harassment, like on average Joe, he wears a body cam. That's good. That's a good idea. And he's, supposedly got leverage over that deal. I don't know what's happening. I'm not going to ask him to explain it, because it's between him and his lawyer if he's doing it. But, you've got evidence at that point. You want to create a barrier around yourself, and you want to give yourself an out. A lot of times these guys will come into your life, and they'll just try to drive you incrementally nuts, and then accuse you of being unhospitable, right? They'll try to control your calendar. They'll try to, set things up around you. And it's just, they're part of that plausible deniability, and that they've infiltrated your life. And they're just, I guess, too stupid to figure out how to be reasonable, but they'll play dumb. Okay. A lot of targets will talk about infiltration. Steve talked about, well, wait, it wasn't Steve. It was on average Joe talked about family members involved, and that kind of stuff can happen. They will be uninvited. They will play stupid. They will have fake apologies. They will be annoying. They will distort your reality. They will try to reframe the whole thing, and they'll try to push it back on you and gaslight you. A lot of them are covert in their methodology. Some of them are obvious, and those guys are just annoying. They're the people that come in and just hit you with the baseball bats. Okay, there's no psychological games involved in those guys, and there's a there's a way that can be beneficial, in the sense that it's obvious and it kills the gaslighting. But usually they're there to create the emotional currency and that emotional framework that the other ones will use to gaslight you. Oh, I can't believe you freaked out on me. What's wrong with you? And the whole thing will be cooked up, and it's incremental. And like we've been talking about, all these scenarios that the target individual is confronted with have an incremental value. Okay, all the things that you are dealing with as a targeted individual are designed for reciprocity, in the sense that it is a crescendo buildup. Okay. It's that final straw on the camel's back that they're looking for. Okay. All these little things to chip away at your sanity, to drive you crazy for that crescendo event where they can accuse you and say you're insane, or get you to do something or whatever. Okay. And it's the perps are going to do that. If they can get leverage over you and gaslight you and get you needy and put you in that place where the only thing you have is bad things or nothing, they're going to do that too. Right. And like I said, that's one of the reasons we have this. And I try to get out here every Friday night, right around the weekends, because that's one of the things that targets deal with. The whole world around you seems to be floating along and dealing with nothing that you're dealing with. And here you are. It's another weekend. It's another Friday night, and they're out having fun or whatever they're doing. Which actually they're probably going to end up with a hangover and puking and probably in a jail. Some of them, but it looks fun. Don't BS yourself. But you have to deal with the fact that you're dealing with social and emotional deprivation and isolation. But having this open forum is good. Like I said, put comments in for suggestions, videos, but they will do that. They will infiltrate. They will try to have leverage, and then you're going to be dealing with the invisible perps. Mats and Miles brought up fuming. That's a pretty good one. V2K. That's another one that targets deal with. Voices, demonic stuff. All of a sudden, you might be feeling uneasy. You might all of a sudden feel anxious or whatever. And it's always, of course, right when you're going to enjoy yourself or, fall asleep or eat dinner or, whatever you're going to do that normal people enjoy. They're going to use that to drive you crazy and just, totally demoralize you. And they do. The framework is centered around things that would emotionally regulate you. Okay. Times that you would enjoy. Like I said, they want you to believe that you're constantly being watched, that you're constantly being scrutinized, that you're constantly under the microscope because it creates attention. Okay. And the perps are good at that. And if they can't gaslight you, like I said, they're just going to come in and use the baseball bats on you. So we've talked about all this stuff. We've talked about the sensitization. We've talked about the warranted suspicion that has created that paranoia around the targeted individual, involving the asymmetrical warfare of the perps attacking the targeted individual and gaslighting them and subjecting them to harassment, innuendos, directed conversations, all kinds of little covert games, facial expressions, all types of manipulation. And it is there to basically manipulate you. Okay. The matrix of gang stalking is designed with plausible deniability, and it is there to manipulate you into having a false proposition, emotional currency, or just to do something horrible. Okay. That's what it is. And it is designed from the framework of the hierarchy that is around you. It's like when targets talk about the Freemasons or whatever. I don't necessarily think that they are specifically after you, but they are people who are involved in something that involves demonic stuff, and it involves the spiritual manipulation. And they, anybody that's out there who is not walking with the Lord can be used to attack you. Okay. Anyone who can be manipulated, any puppet out there, which is the majority of individuals you're going to run into, who is not indwelt by the Holy Spirit, is potentially someone who can be used to attack you. It doesn't mean that there isn't government programs. It doesn't mean that there isn't paid professionals and stuff like that you're dealing with as a target, but it doesn't have to work that way. And you have to realize that can be part of the propositional tyranny that targets deal with, that this stuff involves the menagerie that is already out there, the framework that is already out there, that these people are already everywhere. They're already working at the restaurants. They're already working at the doctor's office. They're already down at the place of your employment. They're already out on the highway, on the roads. They're everywhere. They're all there. And it's always been there. But you did not know that it was there because you were not targeted. And when you became part of this, you were thrown into this meat grinder. And now you are seeing all these things that are there. And to process that information, that all of a sudden, you became part of some type of government program, and now they're all just chasing you around and they're all in a constant collusion. It doesn't always work that way. Okay. And you have to realize that. You have to see the things that are happening, and you have to realize that the environmental tyranny that you are subjected to is designed not only for emotional manipulation, but it is designed for mental propositional tyranny. I'm going to go back into the comments and see what else is out there before we end this. Mrs. Matson Miles, welcome to the live stream. Targeted Patton, you showed up. Sorry you missed most of it. Welcome to the live stream. It looks like Targeted Patton's got some evidence. That's good. I'd love to see a video about that, and I'll be looking forward to that, Targeted Patton. Okay. All right. Well, guys, like I said, go ahead and put some comments up there for ideas and also prayer requests. And I'd like to ask for me again, because I haven't had any for anybody else, but we've had a couple of mentions in the live stream. So I guess we'll put that out there for Unaverage Joe and the attacks in his family. We just pray, Lord, that that these people would turn away from their evil, in the sense that they would conform to being, individuals that are loving. People who are indwelt by the Holy Spirit don't do that kind of stuff. And we would just pray that even for all targets out there, that the individuals involved in this whole thing would be convicted and, feel ashamed, and that these things would be brought to light. We'd like to pray for Steve the Pigeon, that the attacks and the noise campaigns that he is dealing with would be stopped, and these people would be brought to light. I'd also like to pray for Matson Miles and the fuming. It's very demoralizing, and we just pray whatever that is, that would be revealed. Maybe even the people involved, if that's what's going on, if there's devices, that they would get caught and prosecuted, and that they would have to pay compensation for what they've done in demoralizing him and his own property and home. And we'd like to pray for all the targets out there dealing with injustice, that these things would be brought to light. All the targets out there dealing with directed energy weapons or government programs or the demonic stuff, that they would have relief and have times of refreshing, and that they would be brought into a place where they would be set free from propositional tyranny and emotional manipulation. I'd like to thank everybody for joining and acting like an adult. I don't think there's any perps in there that I noticed. I might have missed that. But as like I said before, guys, I like to get together and do this around the weekends. Put in the comments, put in your prayer requests. I like to ask for myself, if you guys pray for my health. I've been having a lot of joint problems, and it's just, I don't even know what's going on. I feel like I'm falling apart, but I've still been working, and I appreciate you guys praying for me. So, guys, God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.